So I wanted to speak today about what we read yesterday for Lazarus Saturday, because the importance of Lazarus Saturday with the ultimate message of the resurrection at the end kind of stretches across the whole week. It sets us up for what we're to expect. And so when Christ came and he had raised Lazarus, there are two things that are important to point out. One is the shortest passage in all of Scripture, which is just Jesus wept. And the reason that this is so important, the reason that it is selected by itself, two words comprise an entire verse. The reason that they set this aside, the evangelists who always wrote this, who made sure that this was so highlighted, was because it really speaks to multitudes of Christ's character. Jesus wept not just because Lazarus was his friend. Jesus wept because he was gone, because he had passed away. Even though the plan of Christ was always to come and to raise Lazarus. That's why he waited 2 extra days when he heard that Lazarus was sick. He planned on bringing Lazarus back to the dead, so why did he weep? He could have walked in and just said, "Don't worry, it's fine, I'm here now," and raised him from the dead. But he wept because he saw in Lazarus, his friend, the absolute mortality of all human beings. He saw his own creation subject to death. He had to see someone that he loved, someone who was close to him, suffer the fate that we are all sort of doomed to, so to speak, to really understand exactly what he was doing, to understand the mission that has been given to him, to understand his entire purpose. This impact of death is so highlighted by the sheer fact that the Lord, who planned on bringing Lazarus back from the dead, still wept. And then, after he had brought him back, there's another specific point of imagery that the gospel points out to all of us. And I'll read it from you from yesterday's gospel. "And when he had said this, he cried out with a loud voice, 'Lazarus, come out!' And at once the man who had been dead came out, bound feet and hands with bandages, and his face tied up with a cloth." And why do we care about what Lazarus was wrapped in? It's not the point of it, right? It's like saying, a miracle happened, but what color shirt is Jesus wearing? There's no point to it normally. But the reason that we point out the fact that Lazarus was still bound, that he was still wrapped, and that he came out dressed like that, it stands to further highlight the fact that when the women came to the tomb to find Jesus had risen, what did they constantly find but all of that which he was wrapped in left in the tomb? It stayed there. All of this decay, all of this markings of us for humans to treat the dead. Everything that we leave on a body, Christ didn't need. And so while Christ brought back Lazarus, he brought back yet another human being. He brought somebody back to the flesh that they had gained, the flesh that they always had. Lazarus stayed in the same body. He was just put back in it, so to speak. So he comes out in these wrappings. He comes out holding death on his person, letting us know that even with this miracle, we are all subject to that same death. We're all subject to this eventuality of our lives. But the reason that this is so important, the reason why we have this counterpoint, is because when we see that Christ leaves death behind him, he leaves his wrappings, he leaves all of these in the tomb, that we are now delivered. Christ is made new. Christ in his resurrection has been brought back into something more glorious than it was before. And in doing so, he has brought all of us from that same doom, that same worry of everlasting torment, that same worry of loss after we stop breathing. And that's the ultimate message that we focus on this whole week, is that it begins with Lazarus. It begins with this one person being brought back from the dead, but still holding on him all that humans are subject to. And it makes us understand more greatly the miracle that is Christ in his resurrection, that as he escaped death, he brings all of us with him into that escape. And we hear this over and over, especially at the end in the homily of St. John Chrysostom, that, "O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory?" Because there is none anymore. Christ showed us that no longer holds any of us bound. And so focus on this ultimate escape during this whole week as we continue to hear about Christ's passion, as we hear about his death, as we hear about everything that leads up to this, all that he is subject to, that eventually that message of hope, that message of our deliverance, not just Christ's greatest act in his resurrection, but that message of our salvation, brings us full circle to realize that we are no longer bound by death, but we are also coexisters in that everlasting resurrection of Christ. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ.